I volunteered for the Air Force in 1941, and we had to report to uh, Lord's Cricket Ground or Regent's Park Zoo, which was the aircrew reception centre. We were billeted in flats, in my case, Hall Road, about six of us in an ordinary bedroom in this flat. We used to dine, if dine's a word for it, in the what is now the restaurant or of the zoo, and it's little change. It's quite recognisable. We were there a couple of weeks whilst we were uh, given elementary drill, and at the time, even corporals and LACs were like gods. We were kicked around. I think I had 3 haircuts in about 2 or 3 days until the corporal was satisfied that my hair was short enough. We were inoculated and vaccinated. Um, the I'm sure all of us with the same needle. We then collected our kit from a garage just off the Edgware Road, and seeing we've just been inoculated and vaccinated, it was no surprise carrying all our kit, that's boots, greatcoat, kit bag and everything, that some of the chaps even passed out on the road, on the main road. After 2 weeks there, we were allocated to some initial training wings. No, we all wore a white flash indicating that we were UTA under training aircrew. Initial training wings were located at seaside resorts and towns where there were hotels that were little used, like Paynton, Torquay, Aberystwyth. I was posted to Scarborough, and we were billeted in Scarborough College, in the main hall of Scarborough College, because I remember our beds were very close together, and I was just under the stage. We were there for a while. We were instructed in hygiene, law and order, administration, navigation, then signalling, both Morse and Orders Lamport. The Morse signalling was done on the seafront at Scarborough, where once again where they'd taken over small hotels. The lamp part of it, the Orders Lamp, was along the seafront. And I think we had to achieve 6 words a minute, if I remember rightly. Halfway through, we were, for some reason, moved from Scarborough College to Old Eton School. It was inexplicable, but there must have been a good reason. Many years later, I tried to persuade Scarborough to dedicate a weekend, a dead weekend, sort of inviting sort of former UTA crew to come back. It would have been good publicity for the town, but they were too stupid to recognise the advantage of it, so it never happened. After Scarborough, oh, by the way, we used to march up and down from the seafront to the school. It was a slope, and it was there's one chap who actually died of a stroke, I think, on that particular march. From there, I was posted, or we were all posted to Heaton Park, which is in Manchester, which was a holding unit where we all expected to go overseas, and our kit was marked accordingly. To my surprise, some of us were posted to UK training schools, and I was posted to Carlisle, and where we flew tiger moths from Stanex, which is now an industrial site. After a while there, I caught mumps of all things, and I was put in a hospital in Longtown with, I think I was the only patient and about 7 nurses, and I was there several weeks. When I came out, I found that I'd been posted and back, because my course had gone, I was posted back to Heaton Park, once again expecting to go overseas. It was the time the Lancaster was coming in and they were desperate for crews. So I was reallocated as a navigator BW. Having joined up as wanting to be a pilot, I actually cried. It was, I was so disappointed. But looking back, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because so many of the pilots were killed because they were the last to get out of the aircraft. If you look at the veterans around, there are very few pilots today, even today. Anyway, I was posted to Dumfries, where we flew in Bothas and Ansons. Now, Botha had the shortest career of any aircraft, and in fact, I'm sure most people wouldn't even know of it. We were there for, I can't remember how many months. The weather was pretty ghastly at the time. And then we had our examinations at the end, and to my surprise, I was given a piece of paper to go and get a uniform. I was commissioned. That was the only training I had. Although I suppose the training at ITW was the sort of training you'd give an officer anyway. I then collected my uniform overnight. I became a pilot officer. We were then posted to North Luffenham, where they were flying Wellingtons, and you picked up a crew there. Now, the crewing system was very sophisticated. You put a bunch of people in a hangar and said, sort yourself out. And you liked the look of a chap. He was the chap you were crewing up with. I mean, it was really like dating. 3 of us got together. There was a Canadian pilot, a very old navigator. He was 26. He looked, I thought he was queuing up for his pension at that age because we were so very young. Anyway, the 3 of us got together and we flew. I remember flying with Jock Reed, the VC, at one time. After completing a course there, we were posted to a heavy conversion unit at Swinderby, where we were flying Lancasters. And there again, we picked up the rest of our crew. That's the 2 gunners, the radio operator, and the engineer. So we were then a crew of 7. After qualifying there, we were posted to a squadron, and I was posted to, or we were posted to 619 Squadron at Woodhouse Spa. Now, Woodhouse Spa, the officers' mess, was the Petwood Hotel, which was the best officers' mess in the country. It would have been a grade 1 hotel if it had a swimming pool, but it was sort of ideal. I mean, we were very fortunate. If you read Gibson's book, it tells you how he found this mess for his crew, for his crews, or discovered it. Well, of course, that's absolute nonsense, because 57 Squadron were there for a while just before us, and then we moved in. The loss rate was fairly high, and I think we lost about 3 wing commander commanding officers in a very short period of time. Anyway, I think we did about 18 operations, if I remember rightly, and of which 6 were to heavily defended Berlin. it was certainly not the time to be in Bomber Command, because that's where the period they experienced the greatest losses. Equally, the weather was foul. Interesting thing about the Petwood Hotel, there was a so-called Kinema in the Woods at the back of the grounds of the hotel. And many years later, sort of probably about 1990, I received a letter that had been written by a friend of mine on the squadron at the time to his sister, saying that he'd been to the Kinema in the Woods with Charles Clarke, and then it was a bit about his girlfriend, and it came at Christmas time, and my daughter and her husband were here, and I said how immature the writing was, and she said, "Well, I'm sure you were immature at the time, because we were really 18, 19." He actually was a dedicated Salvationist, and he was shot down on one of the Berlin raids. And I went to see his parents. They were officers, Salvation Army officers in Tunbridge Wells. And I remember saying, well, he could be a prisoner of war. But sadly, when I came back after the war, I'd learned that he'd been killed with all of his crew. In fact, his young brother, who was, when I went to see the parents, was dying to join the Royal Air Force, or to join the forces anyway, eventually joined, I would assume, the Guards as a musician, and became director of music for the Salvation Army. Anyway, I'd say the weather at that time was still very bad. We were, one particular raid, we were all scattered. We couldn't get back to our own airfield. This was general, and we landed at Pocklington, and I remember sleeping in someone else's bed and going into York wearing flying clothing, which is all we had, to the disgust of the RAF service policemen. By coincidence, only this week I'm chairman of the Bombing Command Association, as you know, among many other things. One of my committee, a civilian who was worked at the museum, said that he had one of his relatives, young relatives, had said that their relative was on the 619 squadron, and he said, told me the name. Why, I remember him well. And he was one of those who was in an aircraft when we were scattered, and we landed at Pocklington. He had to bail out, and with his crew, I didn't, where they really obviously run out of fuel. And when he got back to Woodhall Spa, found that he'd been awarded a bar to his DFC. Now, he didn't even know he'd got a DFC, and he went around wearing a drawing pin on his uniform. We had some interesting visitors at that time.